All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's edition of A Sip of Knowledge with Lou Bryson and Liz Rhoades, plus this week's special guest, Eric Rosentreter from Woodinville Whiskey. I'm going to let your hosts give a more formal introduction to Eric in just a moment.
Yeah, it'll be real formal. Sorry.
What's that?
It's going to be real formal.
Really formal. Yeah, very formal. Lou forgot to wear his bow tie, but it was going to be extremely formal. Anyway, real quick before we get started, I'm Will Hookinga from Zavvi.co, and as always, just want to point out a few different ways you can interact with each other, with your hosts, with their guests throughout the live stream today. So on your right, you'll see a chat box. Feel free to say hello and let us know where you're joining us from around the world. At the bottom of the screen, you'll see a little button that says Ask a Question. So if you have a question at any point during the show, just click that button, type in your question. I'll be keeping an eye out for those throughout the show. And last but not least, feel free to invite your friends to join in. There's a button at the top that makes it easy to do that. But yeah, that concludes this portion of the show. And now, Lou, I'll kick it over to you to give your very formal introduction to yourself, to Liz and Eric.
Yes. Thanks, Will. Thanks. Welcome, everybody, to A Sip of Knowledge. As Will said, our guest today is Eric Rosentreter. I'm Lou Bryson. I am a whiskey writer. I've been doing that for about almost 25 years now. I am the author of, and this is always a challenge when I'm doing green screen. There you can kind of see them both. Thank you, Liz. The author of Whiskey Masterclass and Tasting Whiskey. There we go. Good man. I am totally freelance at this point. I'm no longer working with the Daily Beast. They kind of shut down their devoted food and drink section. So I'm just writing for whoever at this point. If you want me to write for you, just let me know. And today I am drinking, because that's what we do. I am drinking 3 different Woodinville whiskeys that Eric was good enough to send us. And we're going to be tasting those throughout the show. I have the bourbon, the port finished bourbon, and the muscatel finished bourbon. So we're gonna dive right into that stuff. There was something else. Oh, yeah. In 2 weeks, I am not going to be on the show. We're not actually going to push the show back an extra week because I'm going to be in Chicago Tuesday the 10th and Wednesday the 11th. I'm going to be doing events at Chicago Distilling and at Warehouse Liquors, yes. Warehouse Liquors with Eric. That's on Wednesday night at 7. Chicago Distilling at 7 o'clock. I will have more of that up on my social media as soon as we get the details ironed out, but I hope to see some of you there. And
can I join you? Like this?
Wait, are you going to be there? Yeah. We could have a lot of fun. And that is my co-host, Liz Rhoades. I will turn things over to her and let her introduce herself, especially that spiffy shirt she's wearing.
Yes. So I am, for this special occasion today, I'm wearing a Delilahs tee. And
nice.
Chicago is home for me. So all of this chatter about being in Chicago Distilling, all of that, I want to be there. But yet I'm not. I currently reside in New York City. Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining. I'm Liz Rhoades. Technical distiller and spirit consultant. I have over a decade of experience in alcoholic beverage, spanning across several different sites and spirit types and product types, including beer, rum, vodka. But of course, at last, my particular favorite and expertise is, of course, in whiskey. I spent most of my career at a tiny little mom and pop shop known as Diageo, but I'm currently founder and principal at Spirit Safe Consulting, but also I am director of whiskey ops and R&D at Whistlepig Whiskey, which I'm really excited about, and that's my story.
You gonna stick to it?
So,
Okay. Thanks. And our guest is Eric Rosentreter. I've known Eric
including the last 2 years. I think with the last 2 years, it puts us at about 35 years we've known each other.
Yeah, seriously.
It's been at least 10 years, probably.
Yeah, well, the book came out in 14. So
yeah,
I think 8
years on.
Yeah. When I met him, he was at Fountainhead in Chicago, which is sadly no longer with us. But he had got kind of revved up at Delilahs, hence Liz's shirt, and then moved on to Redemption, Heaven's Door, and is now what is your title? Brand Ambassador, representative?
Regional Brand Ambassador for Woodinville Whiskey.
Woodinville Whiskey in Washington. Yeah, in Woodinville, Washington.
In Woodinville.
Oddly enough. So we wanted to get Eric on here to talk to us about, obviously about Woodinville. We also wanted to ask him some questions about brand building, which he worked on at Redemption and Heaven's Door. And also want to talk to you at least a little bit about your woodworking. You do some interesting stuff with barrels just as a side hustle, just something you do.
We'll get into that a little bit. We'll get into that if we have time.
The first thing that we always ask is, how the hell did you wind up here? What led you to your current position?
I famously kind of just go with the flow. I also was born without a map, sort of thing. I tried college, was horrible at it. I'm not good at sitting in a room for many, many hours, and that led me to working in the trades. I was an electrician. Then I started working at Delilahs part-time, 1 or 2 days a week, and it kind of just grew from there.
And for our non-Chicago, non-clued in people, Delilahs. There's got to be a couple people that haven't heard of it.
Delilahs is probably one of the more important whiskey, one of the more important bars in the U.S., if not the world, in my humble opinion. To me, the big differentiating point was there are a lot of whiskey bars, especially nowadays with the rise in popularity of not only whiskey category, but other specialization categories as well. And to me, what makes the biggest difference is...
Oh, no. Are you hearing him, Liz? Dang. The suspense is killing me.
Everybody's welcome.
Wait.
Okay, I'm back.
Are we back?
So I'm just going to keep talking.
Okay. So the most important thing about Delilahs, that's where we lost you. Oh, man, not again. Are we there?
Okay. Hey, we're back.
Okay.
Anyway, to me, one of the bigger differentiations with Delilah.
I think he was trying to say everyone is welcome.
I think so. That's true. Every class of people was welcome there, and you often saw them all on the same night.
Correct.
I shouldn't say is.
Correct.
Is. Yeah. Oh my goodness. This is killing me after the last show. That's a good idea.
Can you hear me, Lou?
I can. I'm wondering
Liz.
if I ought to do like Liz does and do a quick refresh, but I seem to be okay. So the old Delilah's there. The thing, we were talking when you were frozen there for a bit. I mean, you could see anybody there, any any kind of person, any class of person, however you want to put it. They were going to be there. And I mean, you know, there were nights when Fred No was the bouncer. You know, that kind of shit.
Yeah, it's we treat everybody the same, whether you're drinking a pre-prohibition bourbon or a $2 shot and dollar can of American beer on Punk Rock Mondays. Like, it's treat everybody the same. Everybody's welcome. It was a safe place. I mean, I got hired there when it was still that punk rock bar that had a lot of whiskey, and then over my tenure, with the rise of whiskey as a category, we literally saw it in front of us happen. That, you know, it changed to that whiskey bar that plays punk rock sometimes. So it was a cool little paradigm shift, very much in coincidence with, you know, the uprise in social media, the specialization of everything across the board, not just whiskey, but beer for sure it can be lumped into there. So it was a wild ride. With Gerald O'Kennard, who definitely brought my professional experience and through the looking glass of all of that. Left there to work with Redemption. Left them just before the Heaven's Door very briefly, and then the whole world got sick, so that went off the rails. Not a good time to make a career move, guys, when the whole world gets sick. So I actually did about a year at Warehouse Liquors too with those guys, and that was incredibly enjoyable, very enriching. Really kept my eyes very close to what was happening in the whiskey industry from a consumer level. Yeah,
working retail is an eye opener.
What's that?
Working off-premise retail is an eye opener.
It's humbling.
Yes.
It's very humbling. Yes. It's, you know, we saw all sorts too, you know, the people that genuinely wanted to know what was happening, or the people that ask for the top 10 whiskeys, and, you know, if we don't have what they need, they leave. To me, that's weird. I equate that to going to a grocery store and being like, oh, they don't have the Bay's English muffins, I'm out of here. Like that sort of thing. It's like, you make something work. Made a lot of friends too, not only with that, but doing online tastings for much of the pandemic as well with private clients through the Beer Temple. I was very grateful for that experience. So shout out to Beer Temple and Warehouse. Those two crews really got me and my wife, especially me, and not being murdered by my wife over the pandemic. That's important. Yeah. I got a little squirrely there for the first couple months, like a lot of us did.
I'm telling you, I think I'm just coming out of it. You know, I don't know why I am now, but I'm just, you know, unfortunately, I know a fair number of friends and colleagues did kind of crawl into the bottle for a bit, and sure. I've noticed some just in the last 6 months. Suddenly, a lot of Facebook announcements about, oh, I'm not drinking anymore. Gosh.
Yeah. I think it's been interesting to watch that. I mean, now that, you know, I don't want to say we're coming out of it, because I mean, we basically all have Stockholm syndrome after the last couple of years, but it's kind of one of those things that, like, I think that's a symptom of us kind of collectively, or I won't speak for everybody, but for me, I was almost out of the industry. I was over it. I was really close to going back into the trades. And when the opportunity to work with Woodinville came up, it felt right. I got a call from John Trainer, who's our commercial director, when I was cutting my grass / weed patch in the new house that we had just purchased. Very proudly cutting my weed patch. And I got the call. It was a number I didn't recognize, so I figured it was something about my auto insurance or something. And like, I almost fell to my knees. It was kind of one of those things that between that and when Mike from Delilahs called me and told me Gene from Warehouse Liquors was looking for somebody, and that he mentioned me, I'm like, my name came up to these two guys. And I'm not trying to be braggadocious, but I was just like, it was a charge that I needed. It really was. It brought me out of a personally very dark place. I mean, I wasn't waking up and, you know, slugging vodka into my coffee every morning, but I was certainly beating myself up pretty hard. But we're coming out of it. Chicago did the work, kind of like New York City. We were abundantly cautious, almost to our detriment through most of the pandemic. And spring is almost here. And you know how the northern states are in the spring. It's wonderful when our cities come back to life. And now, after being cooped up for so long, it's really, really a good feeling.
Yeah, that's not working for me. I get the pollen problem. But you guys enjoy this month. Enjoy the hell out of it, and I'll see you in June. I'm going to be.
I mean, we might crest 50 degrees today. So yeah, it's shorts weather in Chicago.
Rush that season. So, sorry, Liz, you were.
Well, yeah, so something you mentioned, Eric, you were talking about virtual whiskey tastings. So I really wanted to pick your brain about that. And is that still a thing, or how was that whole experience? And then do you see those?
Is that one of the permanent things that we're going to see from the pandemic?
Yeah, I mean, we're still seeing the frozen screens, apparently. So, I mean, that's, I think, part of our vernacular at this point. To be honest, the experience was brought to my attention from Quinn at the Beer Temple, and I was nervous, but I also get excited about new opportunities and new potentials like that. So, decided to go for it. And we were tasting virtually. The first couple ones were pretty rough, and we were covering whiskey. So it would be North American whiskey as well as some Scotch, which, I had to revisit some of my knowledge on that. Big mistake that I made was going around the room and asking people what they tasted and what they smelled. If you're doing a whiskey tasting with, say, more than 10 people, don't do that. It's a bad idea. You'll spend a lot of time talking about that. But basically what I turned it into over the first couple sessions was, especially pertaining to American whiskey, being, various American bourbon mash bill or bourbon mash bills, as well as rye whiskey, whether it's MGP or other, I tried to put it through the lens of empowering consumers to make choices on their own. And if you liked this wheated mash bill, and it was every day, we never really got into allocated whiskeys or expensive stuff. These were everyday drivers that everybody can find. And kind of just be like, if you like, it's the if then sales model, if then no but, right? And getting into that, well, if you like this high rye mash bill, go to your local shop, shop local, shop independent as much as you can, and engage with them, feel them out. And sometimes your local person, whether it's a chain or indie store, they might not know. So you can kind of head your bets towards engaging in that experience. Don't pull out your phone and look at what whiskeys you should buy. That's weird. Coming from a retail point of view, it's really weird. Engage with the staff, ask them how they're doing. Politeness and good manners will get you everywhere. That's how I was raised. I think that really echoes in the service industry, whether on or off premise. And that's kind of where my focus really was for the duration of the online tastings. Logistically, it was extremely challenging because different states have different rules as to what you can send, because that's completely necessary, apparently. Luckily, that wasn't my end of it.
All different, doesn't it? Apparently.
But again, just empowering people to make decisions on their own. And I view that with everything that I do. And I took that away from Delilahs. It was Brett Keene / Machete that I've adopted into my vernacular. That like, it's don't try to be something for everybody, but try to be everything for somebody, and go from there. Because there's a lot of choices out there, more than ever. Every time I go into the store, there's a new release of some whiskey.
Yeah.
While it's very, very wonderful to see that, it's overwhelming to professionals like myself that I can't know everything, like that sort of thing. But it's part of the joys of the whiskey boom, I suppose.
Yeah, I was actually kind of bummed the other day. A professional, a friend of mine at a whiskey bar was like, "Really? You haven't tasted this yet?" And I'm like, "It is a regional barrel pick. No, I haven't tasted that one. Like, what do you want from me?"
But that's an interesting segue into engaging somebody, Lou. That like, because there's so many whiskey enthusiasts out there, and it's wonderful how many people are getting together and exploring the category.
True.
It's the people that you engage with, whether it's an old friend or regional person that you only get to see so often because all of us travel so much with what we do. That it's the people that approach you that like, what do you mean you haven't? And they some people try to like weaponize that a little bit. Be like, they try to, well, you don't know everything. It's like, well, no, I can't know everything. And no, I haven't had this barrel prick from this bar or this restaurant or this store or whatever. It's the people that really that engage with one another in a healthy way and not a standoffish way. That really I'm attracted to, not only personally but professionally as well. Those are people I want to be friends with and dedicate energy to.
So I specifically relate to what you just said as well. Like, as a technical person, I think one of the reasons why I'm so attracted to the industry is that there's always, something new to learn as well.
Sure. Absolutely.
Which is like, I, again, relate to like, oh, you didn't try this whiskey or whatever. And then like, well, no, there's always, again, like there's always something new to learn. And I think that's something to really appreciate. So not to weaponize, not
right. It's sharing of knowledge and coming up with that, especially like the old guard brand ambassadors, Marty Duffy, Evan Cannog, Maggie Rest, people like that really kind of taught me not only about whiskey, but as I was doing it from behind the bar, knowledge in our industry from a service point of view is directly equated to money, being it's good for the house, it's good for your pocket, it drives people to brands based on what is being taught to them, and that sort of thing. That's what raises the bar, and that's what I try to incorporate into a lot of my daily activities, doing staff trainings, things like that, and doing it from, I don't want to say like a 30,000 foot view, but doing that with my brand being Woodinville as kind of the backdrop of it. Like, I'm not going to ask you to drink the Kool-Aid. I happen to think my whiskey is delicious. And I will hopefully help educate people as to how to properly speak about them. But on top of that, being like, this is 100% rye whiskey. There's not a lot of 100% rye whiskeys out there. Boom. Things like that, and bringing Dave Pickerel into the conversation, and maybe enveloping Whistlepig and things like that, and encouraging people to remove certain vocabulary from their vernacular from a service point of view. Going back to when I first met Craig Beam and his wonderful wife, Nicole, on my 30th birthday, the couple days after Whiskey Fest. So I was green in the gills. But I asked him, what's your favorite whiskey? And I just poured him one of his own. So it was a Heaven Hill whiskey. And he's like, well, it's this one. I'm like, well, okay, well, how come? And it was nothing spectacular. It was a good daily driver from the Heaven Hill portfolio. And he's like, well, it's because it's the one right in front of me.
In my hand, right?
Exactly. And I was like, that's brilliant, and just things like that. And it was one of those moments that he saw me smile. And because he has that good old boy, he's very soft-spoken. At least when I've interacted with him, very soft-spoken. And he saw just the grin I had on my face. He knew I was going to remember that. But that's just how they roll, It just took that from my virtual trainings. Just empower people to make decisions on their own through their own experiences and education. And hopefully they'll choose mine along the way at least a couple of times.
Yeah, I've been seeing this a lot lately. You mentioned about weaponizing knowledge, and I mean that's maybe a little over the top, but that's how we speak these days. But
not meant like that.
No,
Jeez.
I know. But yeah, I just see so much going on in whiskey groups on Facebook and whiskey Twitter, where it's not so much, exchange of knowledge. It's just one hot take after another. This is my approach to things, and that's how it is, and fight me. I'm like, what? Why?
It's not only that, Lou, but it's looking at. That's definitely included the things I don't really pay attention to. I don't really spend a lot of energy on absorbing that and observing that sphere. It's the same with like watching people taste whiskey online.
Yeah.
Coming from my Beverage Testing Institute experience, I'm very, very critical of how people taste whiskey. And if you're pouring it for yourself, you're seeing the bottle, you're seeing the label. It's almost impossible to drink that sort of thing completely objectively. So, and like, I don't care what somebody I've never met thinks about a certain whiskey. Professionals, I do. San Francisco Spirits Comp, the people like you, like Liz and Lou, Freddie Minnick, of course. Like, I respect those opinions, but if it's somebody just creating more noise, that's cool that they do that. I'm glad that they contribute to the vibrancy of our community. I think it's important. But from a professional point of view, it's really challenging for me to look at those contributions and not be critical of them, if that makes any sense. There are important whiskey competitions out there. There are important ratings out there. Some medals matter, of course. But there's a lot of noise happening too. And for people coming into the industry, whether you're a fan or a professional fan like we are, it can be a big barrier to entry for a lot of people. It can be intimidating. And that's what I mean by weaponizing information. It's don't use it as a point of differentiation. Use information as a point of absorption.
I remember
and inclusion.
one of the things I got from Michael Jackson. He used to say, and he was talking about beer at the same time, but he flipped between the two worlds.
Yes, he did.
In a heartbeat. He said you should always try to be descriptive, not prescriptive. Tell the people what you're getting from it, but don't tell them this is what you should be getting from it, because it just doesn't work that way.
No, it totally doesn't.
Yeah.
Liz, you look like you have something to say.
I do.
You always know.
You're the world's worst poker player, aren't you?
I'm going to pivot. I want to learn more about Woodinville.
Okay.
Yes. Yes. Good God.
Sorry.
20 minutes into half an hour into it. We haven't talked about it yet. Thank you, Liz. You were so good at that.
We haven't even touched on the awesome distillery that you guys have and the whiskeys you sent. So, if I may, we could.
So now we're going to taste the whiskeys that I sent to you, and we're going to describe them to our audience. Doesn't that sound like a good time?
Black pepper, always.
That's exactly what we're here for.
Leather. I love the leather one because I'm like, other than maybe one time in college, I've never chewed on leather. So, I don't know. It's the weird descriptors that get out there that it's like, it's so subjective and it can be so pretentious. But Woodinville.
Have you heard my Parker Beam story?
No.
Oh, really briefly. He was pissed off about mangoes and bacon. People using mangoes and bacon as a description. He says, I don't know where they get this. I don't know where they get this stuff. When I make whiskey, I use corn and I put it in oak. And when I drink it, I taste corn and oak. Done. Like, okay.
Oh, there was a Scotch. There was a
Scotch
Scotch representative. I forget who it was now, but there was a Scotch representative that had the same reaction to Heather. When describing Scotch, he's like, 2 people in the world knows what this smells like, much less tastes like. Went off like Dennis Leary-esque rants back when Dennis Leary was funny. Rant about it, and it was amazing. And I'm sitting there like, this. I'm a couple years in the whiskey industry. I'm like, this is amazing.
Okay,
so
Woodinville. Sorry, that's all on me.
Woodinville.
I'm
We are
sorry.
located in Woodinville, Washington.
Which
my
is
second
where?
week. It's right in between Seattle and the Cascade Mountains, so
Okay.
just a bit northeast of Seattle, about half an hour depending on traffic, because that's how we equate things in Chicago. We measure in minutes. My second week on the job, they actually had me at the distillery. I was unloading grain trucks, being part of the distillery distilling process. Went out to the Omlin family farm, which is a 700-acre farm that we get our grains from. So we've partnered with them for almost the entire time of our distilling enterprise since 2010. In 2017, we partnered with Moet Hennessy. So again, I'm actually a Woodinville employee. I'm one of just over 30, I want to say, direct Woodinville employees, but we partnered with MH to access their sales force, access their marketing prowess, things like that. It's a very effective partnership with us. We have our 3 core SKUs, which I have. It's our bourbon whiskey. So our bourbon is a high rye mash. So it's 72 corn, 22 rye, 6% malted barley. Beautiful, 90 proof. All of our whiskeys are 5 years old, sit in 53-gallon barrels. That's the one. Level 4 char, in the level 4 char, heavy toast on the heads from Independent Stave. We have a 100% rye whiskey. So a few years back, before Dave Pickerel passed away, and after he left Maker's Mark and before he went with Whistle Pig, he worked with our distilling team for about a year. One of our founding partners actually chased him down to Chicago at Whiskey Fest and got him to work with our team for about a year, which was very cool. And he helped us develop not only our mash bill with our bourbon, but also our 100% rye. Now, obviously, he's fairly famous for that 100% North American rye mash bill. It's extremely challenging to work with. Liz, you can definitely comment on that conversation way more than I can.
I think he meant you to.
100% rye whiskey.
Yeah, I would say, and especially from the Midwest, right? Corn is king.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, it I think rye can become problematic, both from a growing season, but also from a production perspective. But
I've heard it equate to, I've heard it equated to essentially distilling like kind of a gooey cookie dough. That's where you have like the prominence of what is now officially designated as Indiana rye, which is the famous 95.5 mash bill. That 5% malted barley in there is to really enrich the sugars to kickstart fermentation, whereas our 100% rye whiskey, we use vegetable enzymes in the same way to kickstart fermentation. The bourbon is for me that daily driver, that cocktail whiskey that you're not gonna feel bad putting into a cocktail. It's great on its own. I like it next to an apple, but that's how Jimmy Russell taught me how to drink whiskey, especially in the warm summer months. Cut up a nice sweet apple and have it with some bourbon. Whiskey and apples just love each other. Our rye whiskey, it's counterintuitive to me because it's not what you would expect out of 100% rye. You put that next to another 100% rye whiskey, and they are completely different. And then we have our port finish. Boop. So it's exactly the same genetically in every way as our bourbon. We just finish it for an additional 6 months in fresh tawny port casks. I believe they're 55 gallons. Non-sulfur treated tawny port casks from Portugal.
So where's the muscatel? Where's that wood coming from?
That wood is I'm so glad that, first of all, I'm so glad that you both have to try this. That the muscatel is distillery only release. That was every year, right around September. So a harvest season, we call it our harvest release. We do different experimentations. Mostly have been wood experimentations. just because we're really focused on wood experiment. We're not really experimenting with different age statements. We keep all of our whiskeys at 5 years old, but we're also only in half the country right now, with no plans to expand into other markets for a few years, because if we're keeping our whiskeys at 5 years old, we don't want to get into allocating our whiskeys either, because whiskey allocation systems are frustrating for everybody, for the consumer, for the supply chains, for our salespeople, for our distribution partners, and all of that. So basically, the Muscatel finish was our experimental finish from last year. So that is our bourbon. I believe it's 100 proof. I don't have a bottle in front of me because it was delicious enough to drink it. My wife and I shared that over several weeks together.
It is. Why is it 100 and the others are 90?
Because it's a sweeter fortified wine. And if you look at some of our other distillery-only releases, we regularly have a Pedro Jimenez finish as well as an Oloroso finish. And those are higher proof as well, because again, those are just sweeter. There's a higher sugar content. You need that extra proof to kind of cut through. It's really, try the Portwood. That's one it's part of our core SKU. It's part of our core lineup. It's an exercise to me in restraint, because we realize that you don't want to showcase the wine finish too much, but you don't want to bury it either. And we found that extra 6 months in a port cask is really kind of a sweet spot. I'd say other than maybe High West. High West barrel finishing program is insane right now. I would put us up there with them. Hopefully they'll be coming to other markets soon. I'm hoping over the next couple of years we'll start to see some whether it's a single barrel finish that we start developing with accounts and stuff like that. But it's mostly because I want other people to try this whiskey too, because it really gets me excited as a whiskey, not only professional, but enthusiast. The pour finish is open. It's just the pour finish. Make a Manhattan with it and thank me. Send me a thank you note. Seriously, it's so good. Objectively speaking, it's good.
I think that gets overlooked. I think I have a similar experience. The wine finished whiskey just does better in a Manhattan. It definitely does. I think so. We're finally. I think we're finally at the point you hear marketeers in our industry talking about people drinking less. And while I think that's true, and there are probably stats that I don't have access to that prove that, but that doesn't mean that people are not paying more. And that's an interesting intersection that I think our industry is experiencing right now, that you're not going to go out and get hammered. You might, everybody does it, blow off some steam by all means. Right.
But when it comes to like cocktail menus and things like that, all of a sudden, maybe not as many places are line pricing their cocktail lists. Everybody, these guys have to hold their margins and make their margins too, but maybe $16 to $18 for a Manhattan isn't out of reach for some places, because people will pay that because they might only have to, as opposed to pre-gaming and then going out and having that over service experience. I was 20 and I was in my 20s and working at Delilahs. I can speak to that, but also like getting to that more mature thing. And better ingredients make better cocktails, whether it's whiskey or whether it's what kind of vermouth you're using, what kind of syrups, things like that. Quality equates quality. You can't get away from it.
Yeah. Okay, first off, remind me, when did LVMH get into Woodinville?
2017.
Okay, and what drove them? What did they see in Woodinville that they liked, that they wanted?
Let's see.
I know you weren't there.
From my notes of that meeting, I'm not. To be honest, I think best guess, at least from an outsider's point of view, would be to acquire an American whiskey brand and one that's growing. You're a beer person, Lou, and Liz, I'm not sure if you are, but we saw it happen in beer over the years, that there's a growth by acquisition model that we saw happening in the brewing community. And I think we've seen a little bit of it in the spirits industry, especially pertaining to whiskey. You have Redemption. They were bought by Deutsch Family Wine and Spirits. Woodinville being acquired by, or partnering with Moet Hennessy, Luxco and MGP merging. What was that, a year and a half ago? Things like that. I think that's going to become more commonplace over the next couple of years. I basically, when I'm looking into my crystal ball as to what's happening with whiskey, I rely on a lot of trends that have happened in beer already.
Yes,
I think it's a
very
good,
much so.
Waypoint.
And yet, I think it seems to be a compressed timeline compared to beer. It seems to be the same stuff is happening, but it's happening faster. I think.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
Beer happens. Beer happens at breakneck speed. I don't need to tell you about that.
No. I mean, the changes in craft distilling are happening faster than they did in craft brewing, and I think it's because the people with the money who are making those purchases, or the consumers who are finding that stuff, discovering stuff, they've already seen it work once.
Oh, sure.
There was a lot of hesitation on beer because people were just like, you can't make beer in a small place.
I think with spirits, there's a lot more infrastructure involved too. I think there's a lot more just holistic money involved as well. You need a 3, 5, 10-year plan when it comes to whiskey. I mean, not to talk like a PowerPoint, but that's true. Whereas beer, it's okay. You can do it on a little bit of a smaller, on a lot smaller of a scale.
A whole lot quicker.
There's not probably as much infrastructure investment either. What beer relies on is marketing, a lot more of that, feet on the streets and stuff like that. And I'm hoping now that our industry has started to regain a sense of balance and normalcy, is that people are going to realize that feet on the street are what's going to make your brand. Instagram Live is great and all that, but the world's opening up again, and I'm an old-fashioned kind of person. Get out there and do the work.
Was that a cocktail joke?
Yes.
Wait, what?
We'll explain it to you after, Lou.
I hate being cocktail stupid.
I don't know. Go ahead, Liz. Sorry.
No, I'm just thinking aloud here. If there is something that the spirits industry can learn, right, from the beer industry.
From the beer industry?
Yeah.
Yeah. Kill Corona in its cradle. That's something.
It's hard to say because it's not apples to apples, obviously.
Sure.
The culture is different. The timeline is even faster. If we think bourbon is moving quickly, beer is a week-to-week, if not day-by-day scenario in some cities. So what I'm realizing, too, is that beer, to me, at least a portion of it, is starting to go how rum was in the 90s, and they need to be careful with that, in that like they're dangerously turning people onto flavors more than they're turning people onto beer. And I think that's I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I have no dog in this fight, or no horse in the race rather, about the beer industry. But you see what's happening, and some of these beers that are overly fruited or lactose or adjunct or whatever are wonderful. But you're not turning people onto beer, you're turning people onto flavors. It's more equivocal to like a well-designed cocktail with whiskey as opposed to just whiskey. I love breaking people's brains with whiskey. Tiki cocktails with rye whiskey all day, incorporating different juices, simple things that can be done at home too. That like and kind of just challenge people's perspective with whiskey, with how spoiled for choice we are right now. I'm interested to see what sort of support these new brands have built into their brands. What kind of not only marketing, but what kind of sales force, distribution aspects and things like that. Because I'm just not sure. I'm looking forward to exploring that though and seeing what's going to happen.
So is this a good time to talk about festivals?
Sure. Yeah.
Because I'm just hearing like, okay, how is this, from a consumer perspective, like, from your perspective, like, how do you see festivals playing out in all of this?
There's a lot more of them than we're used to, for sure. They started to come back last year, at least in Chicago.
Yeah.
Like Whiskey X came around.
Right.
There were a couple small ones, and the small ones always can pivot a lot. I kind of hate that word, and I won't use it again through this, I promise. But anything smaller can adapt quicker. That's just how it is. That's the idea behind being nimble. Now that the big ones are coming back with Whiskey Fest and things like that, I'm interested to see what brands go after what. I know at Woodinville, we're going to be at Whiskey X. I like doing smaller events personally. Okay. I think having that filtration of not being part of those fluorescent light whiskey events, that just, to me, that's so unromantic, and it feels a little trade showy. It takes the soul out of the room a little bit. I'd rather do smaller events at Warehouse Liquors. For one, I love those guys. I worked with them. They're family, but also have that intimate experience and see who comes to those. We're doing it Distill America up in Wisconsin. I'm looking forward to that. It's a great value. I think some of these bigger whiskey festivals too they're just really expensive from a brand point of view to participate in as well. And being
some of that pricing was always the idea that you price the assholes out of the room, the people who just want to beat the clock. But at the same time, when you go too expensive, I think you're getting the people that aren't really interested in whiskey. They're just spending money on a big event.
Yeah, and it's that's part of it. On top of, like, from a smaller brand, I know we're partnered with Moet Hennessy. But I've got my own budget to work with. Our brand has our own budgets to work with. Like, we're not that monster brand yet. Maybe in 5 to 10 years we'll be in convention. But putting that much money into what I can extract from it, what is a provable return on investment from this? As somebody who, part of my daily routine is looking at my numbers, seeing who's moving what, where should I direct some of my attention, especially in markets I'm not familiar with, like Wisconsin and Minnesota as part of my territory. That, like, okay, that's the lead. And if I'm putting X amount of money into this and I can't prove that I am getting anything directly from it, well, then I'm going to question that. And my layers of management probably will as well. Yeah. And if not, they should, just like I should, and challenging our festival leaders and these companies to develop and engage in that conversation. It's a challenging one, but I think it's a realistic ask for everybody. Okay, cool. Yeah, I want to participate in this. You've got live music, or you're featuring an artist, or you have artists involved. I love that community. But how do we both benefit from this, as opposed to, here's a check, thanks, we'll see you on Thursday.
Sure.
Whatever.
Who are you looking for at a festival? Who do you want to show up?
Who do I want to what? What was the question?
I mean, who do you want to show up to the festival? Not other exhibitors, but what kind of people do you want coming to the festival?
Whoever's curious.
Okay.
I'm a curious drinker. I like trying new things, but I like the trusted reliables as well. The curious person, somebody that wants to engage, somebody who is objective enough to see past certain things and just learn. Those curious people, that's as opposed to the label chasers. What's your oldest? What's your best? Nothing against those people. To me, that's a more challenging way to engage and maybe shift their perspective. If they want to engage with me, then perhaps we can shift together and maybe look at things a little more objectively for the sake of education, as opposed to like, it's like when you're bartending, like you have people that order things because they want to be seen ordering them, not because they want them. That's when you get into the lifestyle conversation. You have somebody say certain brands of whiskey, a smile will come on their face just by saying that brand and asking for it. It's cool. And I love that as American whiskey has gotten into that, realm that usually was just dominated by single malts, that now we've entered into that conversation as well of having those lifestyle brands available.
Yeah. So
I just said a lot. So let's unpack that for a moment.
Not to unpack everything you just said, but I would say one thing you touched on was the oldest, right?
Yeah.
And I think do you see that changing where people are more interested, consumers are more interested about the whiskey itself, not just like, give me your oldest? Because I get this question a lot, right? And especially when we're comparing against Scotch, right? And it's like, why isn't your whiskey 12 years old?
Why isn't
we
your
do
whiskey
get that.
20 years old?
Well, one of the things that we get,
whatever. Yeah.
Even just as just a basic point that I used as potential exchange of knowledge is all of our whiskeys are 5 years old, but like, well, there's no age statement on the label. I'm like, no, but you can infer that there's no age statement on any of our labels, but they have straight whiskey on them. So you can deduct from whiskey laws that it's at least 4, and we keep ours at 5. That's just, and see, like, that's when, like, all right, you're either starting to get on the hook, you're looking at the bait, or you're just like, I don't care, just give me something because I want to get a swerve on, and that's fine too. It's just being sensitive on engagement of consumers. I see it as my job to do what the internet can't for a brand, and that's basically just get out in front of it, be charming, be nice, always get the laugh. If you get somebody to laugh, that's a bonding experience, and being clever. And I get that from the service industry is, being sharp tongued was just what we do. That's how we stay afloat and stay relevant, but not be condescending. Don't tell people that they're wrong. Because if you like it, you're right. If you don't like it, you're right. I mean, we said that at warehouse all the time. I don't like that one. Well, you're right. Okay. So, and then why don't you like this?
Yeah, but
what don't you like about it?
Right. It's why, right?
Mm-hmm. And challenge them. Not challenge them like in a confrontational way, but challenge them to reflect on why. Okay, well, this one is too oaky, or it's a little too tannic, or whatever. It dries me out. I want something sweeter. Okay, let's go with a younger wheated mash bill then, or something like that. Or hey, try this one. Or, and having the bottles open. Like if I'm in a store, and I love seeing this in the on-premise, at least in our area, or off-premise rather, is a lot of these stores are building in little tasting areas. That is hugely beneficial. It's not a bar. You're not going to go there and hang out on a Saturday, or you might, but whatever. That's a whole different bag of cats. But having that experience, well, okay, I could sit here and tell you what my whiskey tastes like or brand X tastes like. Why don't you try it instead and make a decision on your own? Especially when we go into like single barrel stuff, because even the single barrels that I've started to pepper through my marketplace. When we do a single barrel thing, we have the distillery sends me 4 200 ml bottles straight from the barrel, so that all of our barrel selections are non-chill filtered, barrel proof, and we taste them. I taste them, or I have the group that I'm involved with taste them, whether it's a store or a group or a bar, and all of them taste different, even though they're technically the same. And that's when the interest really starts to come in. Like, well, I've had this before. Well, that's something that we're inheriting from the beer community too. Is I've had this before.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it's getting time to wrap up. I could sit here this afternoon and talk to you all day. You are even more thoughtful than I recall, sir. I have to. This has been really enjoyable. No, don't get too excited. All that means is I'm going to be calling you for quotes and bugging the shit out of you now. So no good.
Awesome. As long as you send me a laugh track. Send me your laugh track, Lou, because if I make a joke, there you go. If I say a joke and play that laugh track, everybody's going to laugh at it.
It's all going to be good.
You have the best laugh in our industry.
Our next show, which unfortunately is not going to be in 2 weeks because it's my guest and I'm going to be traveling. So we're going to try and put that off for 3 weeks. So instead of May 10th, it'll be May 17th. We're not going away. It's just this trip came up suddenly, and I've got to be on the road. Anyway, our guests are Kelly and Joe Blazowski. They are the founders of the Adirondack Barrel Cooperage, our first coopers on the show, and it's going to be fun talking to people like that about wood. They have the most their barrels look like cabinetry. They're just a really, really neat place. A lot of old world stuff, a lot of really, really modern stuff. And I think there'll be some interesting people to talk to. So hopefully in 3 weeks, and Liz and I will both get this out on social media, and we'll get that out to you as to when it is. But we'll see you then for another Sip of Knowledge. Eric, good time. Thank you for coming on. Appreciate it. And
thank you
thanks for the whiskey.
You're welcome. Enjoy. Lou, I'll see you in a couple weeks. Liz, by all means, if you have the wherewithal to come through and hang out for our event at Warehouse, it'd be awesome.
I think I'm teaching a lecture on distillation at Siebel in June.
Oh, cool.
So, there you go.
Yeah. So I will be in your neck of the woods soon, and y'all, it'll be great.
Cool.
Oh, yeah.
Good friends. Good time.
Well, thanks everyone. Thanks for joining.
Bye-bye. Hey, bye, Brad.